Welcome back to the We See Monsters channel. I'm sorry it's been a couple weeks without any content. Unfortunately, my whole family and I caught COVID on Christmas Eve, so I am still recovering from that. If I sound nasally and overall horrible, I do apologize. But I do have another creepy cryptid encounter today involving a Wendigo. I feel like Wendigo stories are super popular during the winter months. Let's buckle up for this week's story, and I hope you all enjoy. I realize how unbelievable this story might be, but I assure you, it's entirely true. I've had countless experiences with the supernatural since I was 4. I'm 33 now, but this is one of the most terrifying ones I've had. I've looked at some of the stories in this community to see if there's anything I haven't discovered yet. I thought that if I shared my encounter here, there might be someone who has some information that could help. I had an experience with a Wendigo this fall in early October in northern Minnesota in a state forest very close to, if not on, a reservation. I've always heard that speaking of them can draw them to you, but I hadn't thought of or listened to any Wendigo stories anytime close to my encounter. I was staying with some very dear friends. I'll call them Mark and Christine, and they have a camper in their yard by the lake for the guests to sleep in. I had walked down to the camper from the house with my miniature dachshund, Ebony, around midnight, and found that I needed to get some things set up, primarily the heater. By the time I was done getting everything in order, it was approximately 1:30. I never thought to lock the door because really, I figured it's in the middle of the woods, so there was nothing to worry about. I was wrong. I had closed the curtains, thank God, and I was having trouble falling asleep because my anxiety was going mad. Mark and Christine's dogs were barking outside, and their geese wouldn't stop honking. Ebony, who usually sleeps under the covers, was sitting on my hip while I laid on my side, and I could feel her turning her head back and forth like she was trying to track something outside. I tried tucking her under the blankets to calm her down, but she kept returning to her perch on my hip. I have no idea how long I laid there. I would say at least 40 minutes, when all of a sudden, I heard Mark's voice outside the camper. "Anybody in there?" And what sounded like claws dragged down the side of the camper. I almost called back when I realized that Mark and Christine were both fast asleep by now. And also, Mark knew I was in there. He wouldn't ask if anybody was in there. Suddenly, I noticed everything had gone absolutely silent outside. The dogs and the birds had stopped carrying on. The gusts of wind had even stopped. It was the kind of silence you hear about in horror stories, how the woods go mute when something evil is in the area. And then another thought hit me. Ebony would be losing her shit and barking at the door if that had been anything human. She was frozen on my hip, dead quiet, shaking. I didn't dare to move, but I was really starting to have to pee, and I remembered that I hadn't locked the door. I have no idea how long I laid there, debating whether I should get up and use the bathroom and lock the door, but it felt like an eternity. In reality, I guessed it was maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I thought it may have been a skinwalker at first, but I remembered they don't mimic the voices of your loved ones to lure you into the woods. Wendigos do. I knew these creatures, demons, whatever they are, can lure humans out of their abodes if they make eye contact with you, and everything in me was screaming to make sure I didn't look outside. I made doubly sure I didn't look through any cracks in the curtains as I walked softly to the front of the camper and very slowly turned the lock, praying and holding my breath. I made sure to keep my eyes away from the windows as I crawled back in bed, and pulled Ebony close, and she finally stayed under the blankets. I snuck a peek at my phone for the first time before I laid down, figuring it had to be close to 3 a.m., the witching hour. It was about 2:30. As soon as I laid down, the wind kicked back up, and Mark and Christine's basset hounds erupted into howls as they came running down to the camper and a little ways into the trees. And the geese started their noise again too. I heard the bassets come back to the camper, barking a few more times before they laid down outside the door to protect me. I didn't get out of bed again that night. I told Mark and Christine what happened the next morning. I think I was hoping they would say they had come down to check on me and Ebony, but they confirmed what I already knew. They had gone to bed as soon as I had left the house. I said a prayer over their house, the camper, and all of us the following night, and had an uneventful night, thank God. I also spoke with another guy who's familiar with the supernatural to see if he knew anything else about Wendigos. I'm not sure how accurate the information he gave me was, or if it's reliable at all. But when I asked him why Ebony hadn't made a peep, I had assumed it was because she was absolutely petrified. He said that a Wendigo can control animals to keep them from alerting their owners about its presence. He also told me they can't enter houses that aren't made of wood directly from the forest they're hunting in, tents and campers included, because they consist of man-made materials. And 2, a lock is useless. They can unlock and open a door, so they can try to lure you outside. And 3, they typically stay in the woods, but they will come into a smaller town and never into a city. I had never heard of any of what he told me before, so again, I can't speak for accuracy, but I also haven't researched the claims either. He also advised me to never go to pee outside at night if I ever go camping, and to bring a bucket or something to use, and to make sure that I always close tent flaps and curtains before falling asleep. He said if the flaps are open so you can see outside, the Wendigo can make eye contact with you and draw you out. After leaving Mark and Christine's to go to my father's house for a few days, I had the distinct feeling of being watched when I took Ebony outside after dark. My father lives 3 hours away from them, but his house is in the country. I told myself it was only the fear from the experience and what I know about the Wendigo triggering my imagination. I never heard anything, and I watched Ebony's behavior very closely, and she didn't act like she had in the camper that night. For more spooky content, you can click the links below to check out my TikTok and listen to the We See Monsters podcast.